And I think we're live. Hello, good people of the internet. You are tuned into the Unlearning Playground. I am your host, Chetan Narang. And like I mentioned in my previous live stream on YouTube, that I want to make a big habit out of coming live on YouTube and talking about all the things that are going on in my life and the direction I want the Unlearning Playground to take. So, this is a step in that direction. Like I had talked about previously, I want to have a lot more focus around learnings and unlearnings on the Unlearning Playground, of course. So today's live stream will be focused on all the different learnings, unlearnings, and recommendations I want to share from the previous month, from January 2025. Now, quite honestly, the previous month was full of some really powerful medicines for me. It I'm actually still processing everything that I've learned and unlearned from that previous month, and it's not really a very enjoyable process. Of course, it is uncomfortable at times, but then again, what growth happens without any discomfort, right? So I wanted to talk about a lot of different broad topics. I have a few written down here for me because I wanted this to have a lot more structure. So the broad topics we'll be covering today will be trauma repair. There's some beautiful life lessons around that. The importance of frustration. This is absolute gold. Then we'll talk about some really powerful motivation to help you go through your lower phases, something I learned from Roger Federer. Then we'll talking about the low phases. We'll be talking about how to understand your own highs and your own lows and make space for both of them, especially your low phases, because that's something that we never really taught that, right? And then eventually we'll talk about a great purpose that I am finding myself aligning more towards, that I find the Unlearning Playground, all the different work I'm doing here, aligning towards. And that will provide a really powerful purpose even for you to align towards in your overall life in general. So I think this will be a powerful video. We'll also actually end with all the different recommendations that have inspired me to do this live video. So we'll talk about the books that I've read, we'll talk about the videos and the different podcasts maybe that I've consumed, the different articles that I've read. So all the different content pieces that align towards the different learnings and unlearnings I'm sharing today, everything will be available down below in the description. They are some beautiful, powerful recommendations. And now I know the internet is full of overwhelm already for everyone. So the last thing I want to do is to put out more overwhelm for you, but consider this to be a sort of my directed effort towards directing you towards things that I think you should be consuming, you could be consuming, or maybe it's just a better way of consuming different content. So take it as you will. If you're watching this in real time, I'm glad that you're connected here. Make sure you stay with me till the end. If you're watching this as a recorded video later on, I hope I've already split it down into different chapters, so you can tune into the section that you want to. Although I would recommend going through the entire thing. There'll be some really powerful lessons, some beautiful motivational stuff as well along the way. And yeah, I think we'll be learning and unlearning a lot together today. I think this will not be a really long video, but let's see. Okay, having said all of that, let's get into it now. Uh, the first thing I wanted to talk about is trauma repair. Now, this is something I learned in a TED talk I was watching of one Dr. Becky Kennedy. She is an American psychologist. She deals primarily with parents, she deals primarily with children. So, her entire effort online is around helping parents understand what their job is as a parent and helping them guide their kids towards a better future, let's say. And she said something really powerful in that video. She said that trauma does not really happen during a traumatic video. Oh, sorry, during a traumatic incident. Trauma happens when you're processing that incident. And this really applies not just with kids, but with almost everyone. So she would give an example of, let's say you're a parent and you've yelled at your kid, and now you're both in separate rooms and you are processing the event by yourself and your kid is processing the event by themselves. If you do not repair what happened, if you do not repair the traumatic situation that happened with your kid, you can have no control over how your kid is processing that event. So for all you know, your kid is actually processing it in a way that I'm a really bad person, I'm a really bad kid and I should be ashamed of my behavior, and that's why my parents yelled at me. And it's not just within this yelling situation, it could also be that if you're fought in front of your kid, if you and your partner had, let's say, a massive argument and your kid was around, and then you do not talk about that with your kid, that can also be a traumatic situation for your kid if you do not repair it, if you do not end up talking with your kid about it, if you do not end up helping your kid process that entire situation. And I really loved it. I really loved how she explains how trauma does not happen during the incident, but when that incident is processed. And that also helped me realize that, we quite often think of such situations, such important big events in our lives as things that are carved in stone. So if you have gone through a traumatic incident in your childhood, you feel as if that will permanently stay with you. But that's not the case, right? I mean, even with myself, everything that I think, if I'm ever thinking back about my childhood, maybe situations that I've been in which were not really positive situations, they're always they're always shaded by what my memories of that situation are now, what my story about that situation is now, which means you always get an invitation to actually repair whatever trauma happened with you. And that is the invitation here. So especially if you're a parent, especially if you are someone who is dealing with a kid, who's dealing with someone who is a little bit too emotional, do not leave processing of a traumatic situation to that person. So help them repair that situation. And by the same token, parent yourself. By the same token, process everything that happened in your childhood which you consider to be a traumatic situation, and just sort of unlearn and rewire your story about that situation. And that's actually something I've been putting into practice myself this entire previous month. Almost the entire previous month, I've been meditating almost daily in the morning. That's actually first thing in the morning after having done your regular stuff. But even before hitting the gym, I meditate daily. And this is something that has been turning up in my consciousness ever since I've actually watched that video. So all the different stories about my childhood which have left an impact on me, they keep coming back and I keep processing them again. And the two words that I use to actually reprocess them with an overarching narrative are forgiveness and gratitude. So let's say if you're thinking about your parents and something happened where your parents acted in a way which left a negative impact on you, forgive them now. You know, in almost all likelihood, they did the best they knew at that time. So forgiveness is a big deal in trauma repair. And then the next word that always stays with me is gratefulness. So even if there are some stories in your mind which come up and you want to blame someone for having done something, you can also be grateful because I'm sure, especially if it's with your family, it's very likely that they've also done a lot of things for you, not just to you. And therefore, forgiveness and gratefulness are two words that I leave you with if you're also looking to incorporate trauma repair in your life. And yes, so that TED Talk is definitely one I will highly recommend you to watch. You will find a link to that down below in the description. Not right now, but after this live stream has ended. And that takes me to my next life lesson. That is actually around frustration. And this is also via Dr. Becky Kennedy because I loved her TED talk so much that I ended up watching a complete podcast she did with Andrew Huberman, of course. And it was beautiful. It was mind blowing, actually. And so, parenting as a topic is anyway something that really interests me. So while I was on my year-end vacation, I had downloaded their podcast and in bits and pieces because I don't know, it's 180 minutes or something. It's o- it's worth investing all that time, but I for one cannot watch all of that in one go. I like to make my notes with it. So I mean, I processed it over a lot of time, but this is one life lesson that really stood out for me, which was, what is your relationship with frustration? Now, this is especially relevant in the modern age because we have such a tricky relationship right now with frustration. In that, when I was a child, I remember growing up in the 90s, there were a lot of things that we had at our disposal, but instant gratification was definitely not one of them. So if I wanted to watch a cable show, if I wanted to watch a cartoon, or I wanted to watch a match, but there was a power cut, I couldn't do anything about it. There was no Netflix, there was no Hotstar, there was no you I mean, uninterrupted power supply at my place. So there was gratification of all the desires that I had, a lot of desires that I had, but there was very little instant gratification. So if I wanted to watch that episode of Tom and Jerry again, I would have to sit through the newspaper and check out when they will telecast it again, and only then would I be able to watch it. And even then, you could not guarantee that you'll watch it. So as we are growing up in this culture of social media and live streaming, etc., instant gratification has really become a thing, which means our relationship with being frustrated has really skewed. It's almost that we no longer can be frustrated. It's almost that as soon as you're frustrated, the first instinct in your mind is to distract yourself away from the frustration. In that you can open up your social media and browse through the reels and get some entertainment there. Maybe you could open up Netflix, and that's like a host of movies out there and a host of TV shows. So there's no lack of stimulation in your life. So in that sense, there's no real reason to be frustrated anymore. But life still is never that easy, right? I mean, you will be presented with frustrating situations in your life. And that is something she was teaching when she was discussing parenting with Huberman, that especially in this day and age, we need to ensure that our kids have a healthy relationship with frustration, in that they do not feel that every time they will be frustrated, mommy and daddy will come up and just take away the frustration from them. Because if that is the wiring in their heads, they will almost always turn out to be entitled kids. And in fact, she gave a very powerful definition of entitled. She says an entitled person is someone who is afraid of frustration. An entitled person is someone who's afraid of being frustrated. And that is the neurocircuitry that builds up in everyone. And now I know this will definitely happen with kids who are being brought up in the age of social media and such easily available instant gratification throughout the internet. But that's true even for adults. So that is something to think about, really. That's something to meditate on and something to really act on. You need to have a healthy relationship with frustration in your life. Because just think about it. I mean, if you're a kid right now, or if you are parenting a kid right now, nothing in life that's actually worth having will come easy. Like striking the right balance in your relationship, or learning to read and write for that matter, getting through a degree for that matter. Nothing in life that's worth having will actually happen very easily, very instantly. So it's never going to be as easy as you do not want to eat something, and mommy and daddy have put up a phone in front of you so that you're distracted away from it and are eating the food. It's never going to be that easy for anyone. So parents, kids, adults of all age, children of all age, everyone needs to have a healthy relationship with frustration in their life. Now that's powerful. And again, this video I will be sharing down below in the description. I think it is worth the time you will invest in it. Not just as parents, not just as would be parents, but just as someone who wants to incorporate better emotional health in their relationships overall. I'm definitely certain that a lot of life lessons from Dr. Becky and Huberman apply to all of your relationships, personal, professional, casual, all of them. And okay, the next thing that I want to talk about now, this was really powerful. This actually just turned up on my feed almost a couple of days back, so almost at the end of the month. It was Roger Federer's commencement address to, I think, Dartmouth College. I don't know how they pronounce it. A college in the US where Roger Federer was giving a commencement speech. And he said something really powerful, man. I mean, I definitely, for one, was shocked at hearing it. He said that, I mean, he is one of the best tennis players ever. He says that he won 80% of his matches when he was playing. But can you take a wild guess how many points he won when he was playing? How many percentage of points he won? It's only 54%. Even the best in the world, just take a time to digest it. Even the best in the world won only slightly more than half the time. And that is how much your failures actually count. I mean, we have these lofty images in our heads that life is going to be super easy, or anything that we are doing in our lives, things will be handed down to us. Or even if not, we expect that there will come a point in our life when our win percentage will actually be amazingly high. And here is someone who played professional tennis for I don't know how long, 20 plus years, more than 2 decades. And he won barely slightly more than half of the points that he played. And that was really motivating for me. I mean, he says that when that keeps happening with you over and over again, you realize that that's not in your control, and you realize that what has happened. So if the previous point in your life, on the game or in your life in general, was a hard point that you could not win, you have to put it aside, because the next point is the next point and you have to focus on that now. And then, by the same token, if you won at the last point, if the last point was pitch perfect, you again have to put it aside, because the next point is what matters now. That is where you have to be. That is where your actions and your mind and your intentionality has to be. That was a really powerful metaphor that I received from him. Again, this video will be available down below in the description once the live stream ends. And talking about feeling high and feeling low, talking about the highs and lows in your life, this is again another life lesson that I wanted to share, that I have been incorporating in my life since the last year at least. Making space for the highs and the lows of your life. Now, this is really relevant for me because I personally feel that, I mean, I am not like that right now, but I know that the culture around me, the hustle culture, and just the entire overarching narrative surrounding social media is always around productivity. It's always around being on your A game, because that is what people share on Instagram. That's what people will share on their YouTube channels also. And therefore, you sort of feel that when you're not feeling so motivated, when you're not feeling that you're on your A game, there is a level of shame that turns up in your consciousness. And that is what I wanted to share today. We're not machines. We are human beings, and human beings go through highs and lows. Just like the moon would wax and wane from new moon to full moon to new moon again, just like that entire process is a continuous process. It's not discrete. It's not that you will always have full moon. It's not that you will always have full energy of being on your A game. Just like that, human beings operate with their energy levels, with their moods, with their emotions, with their motivational levels in phases, as a continuous waxing and waning. And therefore, you have to make space for it. You have to make explicit space for actually days that you do not feel that you're on your A game. And those days, you do not have to force yourself to be on your A game, because you cannot do that. Very simply put, human beings cannot scale infinitely. And that is something that, even though it's not something that is explicitly taught to us, maybe we never found the need to actually teach this to our kids. But especially in the day and age in which we are growing now, you will always find yourself on social media. You will always find yourself on YouTube or online, where there will be a host of people talking about a bunch of different things. And just think about it. I'm sure this has happened with you already. You were not feeling too good. Let's say you were not on your A game, you were feeling low, you were feeling demotivated, and you found out on social media that someone else has just shared whatever they have achieved. Now, it's human nature to compare yourself with that person. But what we do not realize in that moment is that we are comparing our worst part, our worst situation, to probably someone else's best situation. And that's a recipe for disaster. If you really do not make space for yourself to be low sometimes, you will keep burning yourself out over and over again, and you will keep feeling overwhelmed over and over again. And overwhelmed these days is almost the language in which social media speaks to us. And therefore, that is the life lesson that I would teach here. Make space for your highs and make space for your lows, especially for your lows. Understand that you're not a machine. Understand that your motivation levels, your moods will always wax and wane, will always go in the form of highs and lows, and make space for it. In fact, making space for your highs and lows is one of the overarching life lessons from my New Year's resolutions course, too. By the way, that course is still live and it's still absolutely relevant. I've just turned it New Year's resolutions, but it's applicable to everything you'll do throughout the year. So if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you do that. The link for that course will also be available down below, just not right now, at the end of the live stream. And moving on, I would want to talk about one final life lesson and then we'll call it a day here. A great, so that we'll talk about a great purpose that you can align with. Now, this is something that was, I mean, not in the past, since that it's still something that I'm processing, honestly. It's something that my good friend and fellow philosopher Rocco Jarman has shared with me not too long ago, quite honestly. But this is a great purpose. This is a great so that I'm trying to align towards, and I'm trying to have all the content on the Unlearning Playground also aligned towards. And that is making sense of the present moment, making sense of all the different overwhelm that is around us in the present moment. Now, I've actually written down something about it. So, to arrive at a coherent model of reality so that we can stop being at each other's throats all the time. Isn't that something that is worth signing up to? Isn't that something that's worth boosting? This kind of a signal to come up with a coherent model of reality so that we can stop just blaming each other. We can stop always being involved in an us versus them or a me versus you sort of a game, because I think that is one of the biggest diseases of our species right now. We just cannot understand, we somehow just cannot get over ourselves into realizing that eventually we're all on the same team. Eventually, we are all on the same team. And I think I've been trying to, for the past few months now, talk about a higher consciousness, a higher self awareness, and more compassion on the Unlearning Playground. And with this sort of a purpose that I received from Rocco lately, I think I'm finding myself aligning a lot towards this kind of a purpose, because what is a higher consciousness for if not for this? If not to align towards a positive arc of human evolution? What is more self awareness for if you cannot actually improve your own actions, if you cannot align your actions towards a higher purpose in your life? And again, what do I want you to become more compassionate for, if not for realizing that you are eventually part of the same team as everyone else around you? And that is something we have to get towards. That is something that will involve a lot of learnings, of course a lot of unlearnings, and of course a lot of making space for everything that you go through throughout your life. So having said that, let me turn up to the different recommendations I have for you. First and foremost, I would recommend some of the beautiful articles that Rocco has written just around the turn of the end of January. One of his article is termed "What is Reality?" One of his article is termed "How to Make Sense of What's Going On." Absolutely beautifully powerful articles. They're all available on his Substack. I will add the link down below. Then I would highly recommend watching that TED talk that I talked about from Dr. Becky Kennedy. That's a powerful video talking about how trauma repair is probably the most important parenting strategy out there. And then, of course, I'll also recommend watching Dr. Huberman's podcast with Dr. Becky Kennedy. That was also around the topic of parenting, but I personally feel that if you pause and reflect on all the different things that they actually ended up talking about, it applies to every single relationship you'll ever be in or are in right now. Then I would recommend the the commencement speech that Roger Federer gave at Dartmouth. It was also a powerful video. I mean, I could see that Roger is not someone who's attuned to giving a lot of beautiful speeches, but that one is definitely worth watching. There were a lot of powerful life lessons other than the motivational lesson that I gave there. I think he did a good job of motivating those kids. And by the way, one more video that I found really amazing this previous month, was an interview Graham Bensinger did with Jerry Seinfeld. Now, Seinfeld is a character who I particularly love. I mean, I think along with Bill Burr, he's probably one of my favorite comedians right now. Just the takes they have on the present moment and how they talk about processing the present moment. I love both of them. Bill Burr is in a league of his own, of course, but Seinfeld also, that interview that he did with Graham, where he talked about a lot of different things about how, um, about how meditation has influenced his life, about how um, he is as energetic as he is, even at the age of 70, about how he knew always that he was an average writer, an average performer, but just the sheer habit he developed of working at it consistently made him one of the best in the world. I think it's an absolute gold, that interview. I hate when people actually cut down clips and just post those small little clips. Even the entire video the interview video, I could feel that there is not a good flow about the video because it was cut in different places. But having said all of that, it's a beautiful, powerful video nonetheless. So make sure you watch that. And oh yes, of course. So if I talk about a few articles that I would recommend you reading, if reading is your thing, I talked about What is Reality by Rocco. I talked about How to Make Sense of the Present Moment by Rocco. There is another article that I read very recently in this month, which was powerful, and that was titled I Didn't Want a Job by Amy McNee. It was a beautiful, really beautiful article. I mean, she was talking about how back in the day, perhaps in the 1500s, 1600s, or in the BCs, the blasphemic thing to say was that you don't believe in God. And in the present day and age, in the hustle culture, in the social media culture, in the productivity culture, probably it's blasphemy to say that you don't want to work, you don't want to have a job, you don't want to sit in a conventional 9 to 5 job or whatever. And that's what she's talking about, that she didn't want to do that and she would feel ashamed for even thinking like that, and even her therapist were not able to help her. I think it's a powerful, powerful article and you should definitely read it. And now let me end up with a book recommendation, because I read only one book the last month. I've talked about it already on my channel, and it was Rocco Jarman's The Hearth and the Well. A beautiful book, really. I mean, I don't think I can thank Rocco enough for actually sharing this with me. And oops, my notes just fell out. I can't thank Rocco enough for actually sharing this book with me, because I think it's a powerful book. I think everything that he has talked about in metaphors, I think it's almost the ultimate self improvement book. Although I know that we'll be agiling towards better self improvement even than this. But as of now, it is one of my favorite self improvement, self help books that I would recommend you to read. Now, ever since I've been talking about it on my channel, I've received a lot of comments saying that it's a bit pricey because it's written in Australia and it seems pricey in India. Rocco has been kind enough as of today morning to actually open up a PDF version for us, especially for India, and especially pricing it around what books are usually priced in India. So thank you, Rocco, for that. Again, the link for this book, the link for the PDF will also be available down below in the description after the end of this live stream. So make sure you check it out. And that's it. I am not sure how long this video ended up being. I think, oh, 27 minutes. Wow, that's good. That's actually good. I thought it'll be lesser than that, but can't help it sometimes. So that's it. You good people of the internet. For everyone who tuned in live, thank you so much. For everyone who's tuning it as an offline video, I thank you again. A few things that I would want to say: subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like this video if you haven't already, and especially share this with your community so that this video and the different messages that the Unlearning Playground has to offer can actually reach its target audience. In the absolute ocean of the internet that we have today, I think a genuine word of mouth is probably the only way where almost a nobody like me can actually reach the target audience that I want to reach. So make sure you play your part, make sure you share this with your friends and family, and I'll see you in the playground soon again. Until next time, peace out.